a Falcons defensive player that I feel like doesn't get enough love. Everyone focuses on Jesse Bates, AJ Terrell, our new players, Jalen Walker, James Pierce Jr. You know who they forget about? Kaden Elliss, who, in my opinion, Jeff, you look back at Terry Fontenot's signings, we talked about how Jesse Bates is probably one of the best signings in franchise history from free agency. Kaden Elliss is kind of right there up with him. If you look at the contract handed to him, 3 years, $21 million, very reasonable deal. He's going on the last year of that deal. And Jeff, he's the only player in franchise history to have 5 sacks, 150 tackles, and 1 interception. He set a franchise record, and no one's talking about it. Credit to Daniel Flick for putting that out there on Sports Illustrated. Jeff, is Kaden Elliss underappreciated in our fan base?
Oh, 100%. But I feel like that's just an Atlanta thing to do. When you look at Ellis, his first 2 years hasn't missed a game. Started all 34 games that he's been eligible for. Matter of fact, you have to go back 4 seasons to his time in New Orleans to the last time he missed a game. And so, this is a guy, he's been reliable. He's been really good. And this offseason, all we've heard is, you just mentioned some of the guys, but everybody keeps talking about Diablo, right? Like what makes anybody think that an average linebacker at best in Diablo, and there's a lot of faults, and we catalog those way early back when we started recording this. Yeah, people keep shitting on Ellis, and I don't understand why. I mean, he's been in a league where guys miss a lot of time for injuries, in a league where guys get injured really often, right? You can almost every year you can have a all-pro team out of guys on the injured reserves or guys that don't finish seasons. And yet here's a guy at one of the most crucial positions in football, and he hasn't missed a game. And for me, I agree with you. He needs to be talked about more. He needs to be celebrated a little bit more. We need to see more Kaden Elliss jerseys walking around Mercedes-Benz. He needs to be signing more autographs. And this is a guy that, for me, you absolutely have to extend. And I would even go as far as to say, if, $7 million a year, I would pay him 10 to 12, to be honest with you. Like, that's a guy that, to me, has earned more money, has earned the right to be a captain this year. Don't know if he will be or not. But when you start checking off boxes of guys you want to play for or you play with, guys you want in the locker room, he checks every single box. He doesn't complain about being hurt. He doesn't complain about, any of the things that we see guys. He just literally straps on the helmet, puts on the shoulder pads, goes out there and starts thumping people. And so, yeah, I do agree with you. He is absolutely underappreciated, underrated. And think about some of the great linebackers and some of the great safeties that we've had here in Atlanta. And I know, right? The old football, if your safeties have a lot of tackles or your corners have a lot of tackles, it's never a good thing. But that's kind of been the Falcons defense for most of the last 60 plus years, right? So you look at all the guys that they've had on that back half of that defense. And so for him to be the only guy in franchise history, as you said, to have 150 tackles, 5 sacks, 1 interception in a single season, and that doesn't seem like much, by the way. That's less than 10 tackles a game. That's 1 sack every, 5 or 6 games. It just doesn't seem like a lot in a passing league to be able to accumulate those stats. And so for him to be the first, I really do think that speaks volumes as to what he actually means to this franchise and the fact that he is absolutely slept on by everybody.
It's funny you mentioned that about his sacks, Jeff, because he actually doesn't play a lot of pass rush snaps. I think a majority of his snaps, he's dropping back into coverage. If we utilize him as a pass rusher, because he was a defensive end coming out of college, he's a converted inside linebacker, I think he could be super effective there. So I don't know that we're going to, given that we invested so much in Walker, JPJ, Floyd, I don't know that's going to change, but he definitely has the ability to do so. Jeff, this guy, he was a 7th round pick from New Orleans. And, I hate doing this. I hate glazing the enemy. But goddamn, these guys in that stretch from 2017 to the early 20, right before Sean Payton left, they just nailed all of these random draft picks. You talk about Adebo, you talk about Zach Bond, Kaden Elliss. There's just so many little Trey Hendrickson. They just hit so much in these later rounds and I'm happy that Terry Fontenot recognized it, and addition by subtraction, we took him away from the enemy.
Right, but who was in those draft rooms? Who was a part of that draft process?
I
For
hope
all
Terry.
those guys, Terry wasn't like he was the assistant GM, right? He was a part. He was, and he was their lead scout for. Like he was a part of all those conversations. So to me, it's not an accident that. And we've talked about this. This just feels like the first time that he's had complete control of the offseason. Rich McKay hasn't been standing over his head. Somebody else hasn't been telling him what he can and can't do. And that to me is why this offseason has felt so different. But again, it goes back to, he was in those conversations. And yes, we can talk. We all hate fucking New Orleans. That's not a shock. I talk as much shit about them as I possibly fucking can. But it doesn't mean that for about a 20-year stretch, they weren't really fucking good at their jobs. And we can sit here and say that. And so, when you have a guy who was a part of those conversations, who understands kind of what they were looking at and that motto, and then he's able to bring a couple of those unheralded guys over here, and those guys actually produce. Like, to me, it just kind of builds on the conversation that we started having last week about Terry Fontenot. Again, this feels like the first time he's had complete control. This is his best offseason. And this could be the start of something really phenomenal here in Atlanta because you finally gave your GM an opportunity to actually do what you pay him to do.
Exactly. And when we talk about that, like GM, like you start seeing it being like under his control, what we're referring to, if you don't understand what we mean by that, is you look at the third round, you look at the fourth round, all of the players we like kind of took later and undrafted free agents, they went higher than their spot. I mean, like much later. So for example, Xavier Watts, at the end of the third, the guy was a projected second-round pick. Billy Bowman, you saw how excited Jeff Ulbrich got when we selected him. That guy was a end of second, beginning of third round type of guy. Terry didn't look at it and say, you know what, we have a nickel corner in D. Alford. Let's draft on need. Let us, we missed on Jared Wilson in the third round. Let's take the next center. No, let's take the best fucking available player and figure it out later. That is the approach he took that we haven't taken in a long time, to be honest with you. And it's quite refreshing seeing that as a fan, because that is how you grow and build. Just because we need, we had that need at center, we don't want to take a guy that's just going to get cut next year. We might have something in Watts. So we'll see what happens there.
He took high-value guys, right? He took high-value guys far beyond where their expectations of where they were going to land was, and he did a really good job of that. He took advantage of the opportunity before him instead of doing exactly what you just said, going based upon some other opportunities. He went with high value, and it worked out for him this year.
Yeah, and he's in his contract year, as you said, with Ellis. So I would hope they would extend him before he gets too expensive, because he didn't make a Pro Bowl last year. He didn't make an All-Pro. He had better stats than Zach Bond, who was a heralded, Pro Bowler, All-Pro, or whatever, because he was part of the Eagles Super Bowl team. You put Kaden Elliss on the Philadelphia Eagles on that Super Bowl team, I promise you his name would be a household name. Jeff, he is the only defender selected, or actually offensive or defensive starter selected by Bill Belichick in his version of the All-Pro team, All Belichick team. So only guy on our team to get selected there. What do you think, Jeff? Do you think this guy, like, if we don't extend him here, I mean, he might get too expensive for us the following offseason?
Oh, he's probably working his way toward that. Like I said, I would offer him 10 to 12 million, as an extension. And it wouldn't shock me to see it get done. But for a guy like Bill Belichick to spend as much time as he does around the game, and for as successful as he is, and people would argue he's the greatest coach of all time, for him to say, for him to show out and show off and add his name to that list. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, every year the NFL does those like year-end bonuses for guys that were drafted certain times and exceeded their play exceeded their contract. If I'm not mistaken, was he not the Falcon that was on that list? Like the Falcons had a couple guys. I'm almost fairly certain, and we can obviously look that up, but the NFL does that bonus structure for guys that outplay their contract or whatever it was. And the Falcons had one guy, and I'm almost pretty certain it was Kaden Elliss on that.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but that would not shock me at all, because even though he wasn't selected for those Pro Bowl, All-Pro honors, He's playing like one. We're to be honest with you, I hate to be this blunt. We're kind of holding him back. The fact that we're not putting him in playoff games in big time moments is why he's not being recognized by the national media. Hopefully that changes this next season.